Welcome to New Game Plus, a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name is Kenny.
Nolan.
And this is Elements, our monthly bonus episode where it's not necessarily always monthly.
Our occasional bonus episode.
The last few have been monthly?
Or semi-monthly.
They've been monthly.
Depends on how long you think a month is.
This one, like all of them, are brought to you by our bodily present patrons over at patreon.com/ngppodcast.com.
Yeah.
Where you can support the show for as little as $1 a month and get some sweet perks to boot. Speaking of bodily present.
Yeah, I have a body and it's present.
Me too. Wait, are you real?
It's so much easier
He's
and
real,
better.
folks.
It's so much easier and better to record in person like this.
It is.
A little bit.
Oh, it has not been easier.
No.
No, it's not easier. I, at least in this case, have the excuse of knowing when I'm going to interrupt you because I can see that you're about to talk.
I think you'll still do it.
Yeah, I still am going to talk over you guys, but I'm going to know that it's about to happen.
Kenny's a really loud talker. You know,
In
like
real
he'll
life,
bust
yeah.
up in your house and you're like, hey, can you keep it down? His like down level is
I'm boomy.
Yeah, it's
When he
booming.
screams, honey, I'm home anytime he kicks the door open.
He just screamed into the mic before we started it.
Well, I did.
All of that being said, you can see with your eyes if you're watching this on YouTube. If not, you're just listening to us and saying, what are you talking about? We are, for the month of spring break, spending time together recording
That's not.
an abundance of content.
I wish it was a month.
Our wives wouldn't.
No. That wouldn't be great. But
That'd be awesome.
For the first time in the history of our podcast, we are recording like this in a studio together, physically, bodily. Come on. And so we've been doing some live streams. We've been producing some content. One of those pieces of content is this here Elements episode. Kenny?
Here's the thing about Elements.
Okay.
If you aren't familiar with it, it's one of my favorite bonus content things that we do because it gives us a chance to talk about not just specifically old games, but to just choose a game that we think is interesting for some reason and talk about one specific element of that game, like its flesh tones or its shoulder caressability, and go kind of more in depth. This month, if you will, we are talking about a game that is well known for a lot of different aspects. It's well known for its success as an indie title. It's well known for its challenging difficulty.
I feel like
a whole bunch of things.
Slow your roll.
But
You're just explaining Elements.
what can I not give away? But this week we're gonna focus on the graphics of this game.
Okay.
There, I didn't spoil it for
Well,
you.
no, so we usually don't do that at
It's
this
a
point.
half spoiler.
It's crazy because we have done a good amount of Elements now, and you should know the format.
Dustin thinks he's such a professional.
I mean, we took like a two-year break from it, so
I'll give you
we're
a break.
rusty.
Today we are talking about a 2017 run and gun video game developed and published by an indie video game development company called Studio MDHR.
Do you know what that stands for?
Moms, Dads, Honeys, Rovers.
I think it has something to do with their last name, but I
No.
haven't deciphered yet.
It's my Dustin's Human
Stop.
Resources.
It came out in 2017 and has been on a lot of consoles, PC, Xbox One, PC, I said that twice, Switch, and PS4. And it's a game that is set on Inkwell Island.
Yeah.
Two young brothers, fun-loving brothers, they're in trouble. They lose in a game of craps. No, at the devil's casino, and now the devil wants to take their souls. Instead, he makes a deal with the brothers. If they can collect the souls contracts from the devil's runaway debtors by midnight the next day, then he might spare them.
Yeah.
You forget the story?
Yeah.
It's a great story, though.
No, it's fine.
But we're not talking about the story.
Exactly.
We're not talking about the music or the gameplay or the characters. As Kenny has already told you, we are talking about the graphics of Cuphead.
The most unique thing about Cuphead is the graphics, and so it's good that we're talking about it. They're sure plenty of qualities, but people know the game by the graphics, I think, because it was hand drawn. The animations for the graphics themselves were not digitally mastered. They didn't use assets. Like, it's easy to make a game. It's not easy to make a game. That's not true. But to use online libraries of graphical assets, to even use digital artwork. Sure, that there are plenty of people that can do that.
And that's fine.
That's fine, and great games have come from that.
Right.
Not everyone can hand draw an animation for an entire video game.
Right. And think the traditional hand drawn, like you've seen older Disney, where they have workstations and they have a single page that they hand draw something on. They flip it, draw the next frame, flip it back, make sure that that's what they did for this. They actually had physical stations where they did this.
It's like in the behind the scenes features of like Disney VHSs, you would see it would show the artist at the easel.
pre 95 Disney.
It would show you like them doing this. And like that's kind of what we're looking at here.
Now they did have some digital work done afterwards. So they coloring was done digitally and whatever. But like the animations are all done.
The distinctive nature of the art style is going to come from the fact that they took the time to draw them by hand,
and you can tell,
and animate them by hand too, like to do the whole process of like being a purist on like hitting this old format.
And they are Chad and Maya Moldenhauer. Those are the artists. And they were extremely picky about like everything. I from what I understand, they threw out a lot of drafts. They returned to it several different times. I have a quote from Chad in an interview that he gave about talking about the graphics, and he said, "In the grand scheme, I hope people eventually realize that," and he was speaking about 2D versus 3D. That was the question they asked him. He said, "I hope in the grand scheme people realize either 3D or 2D isn't the reason why things are better or worse. It's the underlying story, the gameplay. That being said, real 2D animation on paper isn't as easy, and it isn't being taught in a ton of schools like it was 20 or 30 years ago, so it's a dying art. And there needs to be a resurgence before you're going to see a lot more of it." And that's why you don't see most things are 3D and most things are digital.
It's harder and took a lot more time in development too. I think Cuphead was originally supposed to be out, or they were shooting to have it out
a long
years
time
before it actually dropped, because this process is just very time intensive.
I think the first approach to it was 2000.
Yeah.
And at the time, they obviously weren't equipped for that, so they had to return to it.
Some of our patrons were allowed to speak in, and Garlisle said, "Cuphead does an excellent job demonstrating what 2D animation can still do for the medium. It's understandable that due to modern tools and expectations, 3D visuals have often become cheaper to develop with even for purely 2D games. But the further you go from realism, there's only so much clever posing and shaders can do to 3D visuals. The more wild your art direction, the more that 2D art is able to do." And that's what they did here. They created something that was unique enough while still going traditional enough. So like it's unique, but also it's unique for today, but a massive traditional nod to the glory days of the past.
Exactly.
MDHR didn't set out to just hand draw animations for the novelty of it. You know, they did it for a specific reason, and that's, you know, not just to make more work for themselves or to have us talk about how novel it is on our, you know, podcast. They knew we were going to do this, of course.
Yeah.
Chad knows. But that wasn't, you know, it wasn't bait for like, we're novel. They were trying to achieve a specific look that you're not going to get there. And the inspiration here, we've already talked about it, but there's this very distinct 1930s-ish kind of early animation style that this game is sort of the bread and butter of. It's not something we've seen ever, but I think it was really smart to choose this style as a kind of vehicle to you know, share your game vision with for a couple of different reasons. One, it's creative and different. It does allow you to like do something like hand-drawn animations and keep that medium going. But two, you just have this sort of iconic era of
Disney,
of everything, of just like video and what that looked like that isn't being utilized anymore. We see a lot of like throwbacks to other styles for, I don't know, stuff in more recent than kind of this old animation look. But you don't see it all the time. So one, it makes their game automatically just completely novel. Mm-hmm. Like it gives them a distinctiveness that nobody else is going to have, which is great. Two, the the icons that you do have are so solidified in people's minds. The Betty Boops,
Steamboat
the
Willie.
Popeyes, Steamboat Willie, that era, that when people see it, it's going to sort of automatically feel nostalgic in ways that you're not going to get with other, like visual mediums. But then two, it just works really well for a video game. You go back and look at all those old cartoons and things from the era, and it's lots of crazy, wild, super like out there from left field, non-realistic, almost absurdist actions, but that are all happening in this like 2D plane.
Completely absurd. You see these, and one of the catchphrases in this conversation is rubber hose animation. That's what they use for some of these characters.
Arm, rubber hose.
Noodle arm that's really good too.
It's that same idea of these animations that can stretch and move different ways.
And it's absurd. Even if you have characters like Betty Boop, or I'm thinking of like Olive Oil. Is that her name?
Yeah, for sure.
In Popeye. Like you've got these noodle arms, but also it wouldn't completely take you off guard if they morph into something else or if they stretch, because it's already not realistic.
Right, it's a cartoon. The rules are whatever happens is the thing that's allowed to be happening, which gives you so much freedom in how you design your movements and the kinds of things your characters can get away with. And it's not limiting like a lot of other genres might be. And so not only are you distinct and creative and like fun and old and nostalgic, but you can also do whatever you want with the actual gameplay, and which is so nice for them.
It's not like that style is still around. That
you don't see it ever.
They revived it. There's no modern rendition of the golden era of cartoons.
No.
And they did it accurately, and like they didn't want to alter anything.
And not just with the animations, some of the things that I really love about it is that they have like a color offset, so it's not necessarily rich, vibrant colors all the times, but there's this offset.
You can even play it in black and white mode. Like if
that's
at the end of the game, you're like, "You want to play in black and white?" And you're like, "Yes."
And then,
of course I do.
Additionally, they have like a filter over the screen, so like there's dust and scratches.
Yeah, you get
that
like old
filter.
film.
So like there's a lot of nods to that. There's one other thing that I noticed, and it's that characters are always moving. Did you see that?
There's a rhythm to it.
Even if there's a rhythm to it, and it's in part because of the music, because they're going 1930s with the music too, jazz band.
But that's very much from that style of that time as well.
And it's because if they're going to take the time to hand draw and animate, they're not going to have characters stand there and not do anything.
Right.
You think Dragon Ball Z, or one of the things that I still thought Dragon Ball, because like some of the characters just stand there when they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
Multiple frames for a long time.
It's just their mouth going.
It's just their mouth doing that. But here, the characters are bouncing at all times. There's always movement. Again, it's going back to this animation, but animation that first started in the 1930s.
Yeah.
This game is a game that is not focused as much on the stages in between, but the boss battles. It's all about these boss fights.
Yeah, it's Dark Souls. Everyone made the joke that it's Dark Souls when it came out, but like, I mean, that's
2D indie 1930s Dark Souls.
Like Elden Ring has a lot to thank for, from this game.
Probably.
But these absurd boss designs that fit in that 1930s world, you wouldn't have necessarily seen them back in 1930s, television or cartoons, but they've got this plasticity, this malleability. Is that how you pronounce the words?
Yeah.
And to these characters, to these bosses, that I don't know, they can transform from a bee into an airplane and come after you, and you don't think anything twice about it.
No, it's fine. There's Medusa Mermaid. Like, sure,
it's cartoon rules.
Anything goes.
But the expertise in this boss design, that they go minimalist. Like there's not a lot of like detail on clothing or on arms or anything like this, but they have these expressions that are so massive, particularly with their mouths. A lot of these characters have teeth that are on broad display. You very rarely see the teeth of Cuphead or Mughead.
Yeah.
But you
Mugman.
Mugman. But you often see the teeth of these characters to show like this like fierce.
The devil's grin is so like it's iconic. Like I think Cuphead when I see that big smirk and he's like looking down at them.
It shows aggression, but again, all the mouths have these like defined lines, and a lot of these bosses have sharp edges, which also like bring out this like fearful thing.
Yeah.
Round is nice and comforting, and these sharp edges, which are often used, but a lot here even they have these round lines. I don't know if you can say round lines, but these round shapes, and are still able to produce some kind of like aggression, anger with it, and it's great.
One of the standout bosses for me is the plant man. Because, like we were saying earlier, the rhythm to it, he's like dancing like
the flower.
This. The flower. Yeah, he's like doing this the whole time and like looks menacing, but also it's hilarious because it's like you're watching a cartoon and it's just warming. I don't know. It just captures the absurdity of those bosses. I mean, they're all great, but that one always stood out to me.
And I know this was an intentional thing, partly because it's obvious, but partly because when you hear the team talk about decisions they made in animating this game, they point out that this was an intentional thing. But these bosses are so distinct from each other. No boss plays like another boss. You're not going to do the same thing. Even though platform video games sometimes lend themselves towards repetition, they do such a good job of mixing it up here on every level, but especially the bosses and the look and the play of them. Totally different. Each one is its own character, and it's like a little story, a little like cartoon vignette as you fight each of these bosses, and it's beautiful and varied, and it's amazing.
The other really clever thing that they did with the boss fights, part of a core mechanic of the game is a parry system, so that it's bullet hell at times. It's just overwhelming, and so they had to have something in the game that like allowed you to get hit, but you didn't take damage. So if you time your inputs, it's called a parry. They did it with this pink, very distinct puff ball.
Mm-hmm. You can like jump off of or bounce off of?
Yeah, you can bounce off of it, and like there's an audio indicator, but it fits in all those fights, and it never stands out like... It's never immersion breaking, if you want to call it that. They just put it on the bosses in all the right spots, and so it just works.
Again, one of our patrons, Garlisle, said the bosses react with grand emotions, sweeping gestures, and transform in vibrant, bold ways that just couldn't be replicated with models. And one of the things that Dark Souls wish it could do is have multiple phases. That's not true. They have phases.
Oh my god!
But they don't. They, as far as I know, and I'm just being facetious, but they don't have these massive shifts to a different kind of creature. And often you have that here. One of the things that I respect is that they don't have a damage meter in this game on bosses. Yeah. And you only can tell you're hitting it by the flash. And then there's grimaces, and then the transformation into these more absurd things. They might start as a flower, but then they become something more menacing. Or I think there's this one blob that you face that turns into that dies. It's smashed by its own tombstone, and then the tombstone fights you.
Up. That was so funny.
That's great. Yeah, and also, the health bar is represented after the fight, after you lose. It shows you walking towards a finished goal, and so you could be like, dude, I was a pixel there. I was almost
so
there.
Close.
And see, I've never saw that because I never lost to a boss.
Oh, right. Sure.
Yeah, that's how this game works.
Okay. Something else that they did that no other developer is going to do, because it's almost like a step backwards in graphical advancements and in technology, is they messed with the frame rate. They had fun with the frame rate in that 60 FPS is like the standard now. Yeah. You have to have 60 FPS for smooth gameplay, and this game does. This gets trippy. It's not even clear to me. But they, in the graphical representation of the game, intentionally nerfed it so that it's 24, which is the frame rate of films. So when you go to the movies, you see it 24 frames, because you can always tell it feels more fantastical. Because when you're watching on TV and these newer shows, when they up it to 60 FPS, you're like, this looks fake. This looks strange. And it's weird that descaling the frame rate makes it do that, but they did that to make it seem like you're watching the projector in the theater with the scratches. And
they were purists about delivering this vision of this old style enough to make the gameplay, like how you're literally building it mechanically, not just visually, kind of all stay unified. And that's amazing that they would go like, we want to do this authentic old style thing, make it work as a game, and a very fun, challenging, unique game on its own right. But even so far as like limiting your frame rate to give it that cinema feel, And I just have so much respect for that willingness to say, like, here is our vision. It will be harder on us to do all of these unique things that aren't normal, but we're going to do all of them anyways because it's going to give us a final product that feels, it's such an indie move, but it just works here.
But it doesn't
so
affect
well.
gameplay, like, because the gameplay's at 60, but even visually you would think that would affect the way you're reacting and all that. It doesn't. It feels smooth.
And I can't wrap my mind around it either, but I also can't I can't come up with the last 24 FPS video game that I ever played, other than
I don't know.
Cuphead. Like
I don't know if you've ever played one that's intentionally at that frame rate, because
probably not.
Even your old stuff, you're gonna have
60?
games.
No,
that are 30. Like the refresh rate of the TV, which at least is my understanding. It may work a little different with like scan lines on the NES and whatever, but I would say they're probably that 29.97 or whatever it is that's the normal refresh rate of like your visual medium. That's what the games were gonna have.
It's like pre-HD.
Yeah, so this to some degree is gonna feel different.
So cool.
Even than other, like old games.
Yeah, it's just remarkable that they can do both, that they can give you the visual look and feel of something retro and old, and or classic, I'll say that, and then they can give you the gameplay that you need to be able to keep up with modern standards.
For it to feel smooth.
Because if
so
gameplay was 24,
it would feel janky.
It'd feel really janky.
Because your inputs would be the laggiest of all time, and you'd be like, okay.
But they're able to pull up both.
So cool.
We've talked about some of the ways they're so consistent. They hand draw the animations. They limit FPS in all the ways. They stick to this very specific 1930s vision, but the way they fleshed all of that out, because that accounts for your characters, the stuff happening that's moving, and the front of the screen. It doesn't account for the world and the ambiance and the setting of where this game is taking place. And they continue to stay as purist as you can be on those fronts by providing really stunning watercolor style background animations. And we can't talk about this game and the way it looks and the graphics without pointing these out, because these are some of the most artistic elements to me. They were very artistic with the bosses, but in like creative, fun, like we're going to tell a story in their character kinds of ways. But these backgrounds are just beautiful.
What is kind of crazy is that I think maybe some pixel art games do depth better than Cuphead in the backdrop, because games got super creative. Think of SNES backdrops and Genesis backdrops. Some of them are colorful, ton of depth, ton of detail, but you can tell these are watercolors, and so they look flatter for that reason, but it's intentional and super works, because the forefront is craziness. It's bullet hell, it's motion, it's rhythm, it's movement, and then the backdrop is peaceful.
Right. It's not giving you realism, but it's giving you exactly the tone that they want of nature and these beautiful clouds going by, or the sunset.
It's kind of muted too.
Yeah, or this village in the background that can kind of scroll but at a different pace than than the stuff going on in the front, to give you a little bit of that depth. And just my understanding, and I could be wrong here, my understanding is that like some of the other colorization, I don't think they went in and actually hand drew all of these backgrounds. I do think that was one of the places that they did this stuff digitally, but it has such an authentic feel to that old watercolor style, and I love it.
Yes, it is digital. One of the things they did do, however, the work that indie creators create for themselves,
absolutely,
I know they deserve more than they.
But one of the things that they did do for some of the stages, and you can tell, especially like I wrote down one, Pyramid Peril. It's a stage where you fight against the genie. In the background, you're circling around this kind of like pyramid and a little village that's around it. They actually created a model, a physical model, filmed it in 3D, put it digitally, and then watercolored it. And watercolored it?
Sure.
Watercolor painted it.
I'm fine with it.
But the idea is they made the visible model, they filmed it, they put it in digital, they painted it. But to go to that extent, when you could have done it all digitally, a lot easier, it adds something there.
I'm starting to realize that they treated the game more like filming a film rather
Yeah,
than
it
making
was.
a game because that's what filmmakers do. They make models to make things
Yeah.
look bigger, and they hand draw stuff when they need to, and it's much more like hands-on mechanical approach to this game
It's
than just sticking inside of your artwork app
It's-
or whatever.
it's as excellent an homage to the medium as it is a game.
Yeah,
That's good.
You know,
Yeah.
it's both.
Will
like
that
it
preach?
excels at both of them. We didn't
I'll
talk
tell you
about it.
later. I'll tell you later.
We didn't talk about it, but that results screen at the end, and they have
Yeah.
that background that's like blue
Uh-huh.
and rotates. So iconic.
Yeah, it's
It
great.
just feels so good.
Also, the world map is
Yes.
watercolored as well, and it
Gorgeous.
looks very, very good. Clint, one of our patrons about the world map, said the map is such a gorgeously designed landscape that flashes me back to a time when I was young and had one of those toy car rugs.
yeah.
I
Whoa.
love how well it fits in the world
The
of
roads?
Cuphead,
Dude, that's a good comparison.
isn't it?
Yeah,
A
it
good
is.
comparison?
That's
You're
great.
just looking down on that. That's great.
All of it is just very appealing, pleasing to look at. And it's so interesting because Dark Souls is not. I mean, it's beautiful in its own right.
It's grim.
But it's grim.
Yeah.
Here it's pretty colors. It's traditional vibes.
The boss is a flower. He's
water-
happy.
yeah.
And they're cartoons,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right, but you're still throwing your controller at the screen
Yeah.
out of rage.
Yeah.
Right, and they're happy as they terrorize
Right.
you. It's still
And Satan's after
it's
your
still,
soul.
Right, dark, but in like this upbeat 1930s
Yeah.
live jazz band music kind of way.
Yeah.
And the tension there is, I don't know, part of the vibe, and it's
The final topic I would like for us to talk about related to Cuphead is its legacy. It's a lasting legacy. Now, it just came out in 2017, so it's not too long ago.
I mean,
However,
5 years.
I do think that it has been an inspiration. I've got to say there's, at least for me, an unknown inspiration related to, hey, this kind of indie, creative, hands-on approach still works.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay? But then there was a more visible legacy that was left behind. So it was an inspiration for a few other game developers. It's XIXO Games. Maybe you pronounce it like that. Maybe you pronounce it Zizo. I don't know. I have no idea. But it's a studio that created a game called Enchanted Portals, and they directly cited Cuphead as an inspiration.
Sure.
Kindly Beasts. They created Bendy and the Ink Machine.
Oh, that one seems like a very overt reference.
Yeah, Bendy and the Ink Machine, they were really going there. But not only that, there was an animated show that came out on Netflix of Cupheads.
Yes.
And I actually watched a little bit of the first episode.
Okay.
It's always weird because, I don't think Cuphead and Mugman have voices in game, do they?
I don't think so. I don't remember.
I don't think so. Some characters have voices. I don't remember if they do. But when you hear voices from characters that you didn't previously hear voices from, it's always awkward. But how easy was it to transfer it to TV? Because it's
reuse
kind of
it.
already a TV show,
Just
right?
reuse it,
So
yeah.
all of the characters, all of the bad guys, all of the good guys, they're in the show. And yes, it works perfectly.
I think they got renewed for a second season too.
yeah,
which is,
already renewed
which
for a
is
second
great.
season.
Like the other thing too that I think they handled really well, and what will be important for the legacy is, and they've talked about this in interviews too, is how they tackled the darker sides of that golden era of animation, because
Sure.
racially charged,
Sure.
there were a lot of not okay things about it that they had to approach and say, okay, cool, this is getting into that territory, leave it alone, and they moved direction,
And
which
this-
is so smart.
This is what
Yeah.
I like, because you've got options. You can either just readily accept things, you can reject things, or you can redeem things. And I know this is getting into I know this is getting
That's
into sermonic stuff, but and I think a lot of people would be ready to just reject it. It's got a sordid past, or some people without knowledge would just readily accept it. They're redeeming it so that now people can look, because kids, they don't know 1930s animation.
No.
We know a little bit because some of it was left over when we were younger.
Yeah.
But kids won't. However, they can turn to this and have a legacy there or a connection there that isn't vile and that doesn't have any negative thing there.
It's just
and
fun.
I think that's beautiful. I
great.
wanted to say, I brought up earlier over lunch, they have a few different voice actors for the characters.
Yeah.
The voice actor for King Dice, Wayne Brady.
Is it?
It's Wayne Brady.
That's
I'm
great.
watching
From Whose Line Is It
I'm
Anyways?
watching it.
So, so
King Dice.
definitely a legacy left, and
You
maybe
mean-
that's still being left.
You mean from the Wayne Brady show?
Whose Line?
Whose Line? That's the
And
best show.
he also hosts a game show now.
Yeah, and I'm blanking too. But
It's an old game
wait,
show
is that
that's come
it?
back. It's
There
not the
literally,
Wayne Brady show.
yeah, but there literally was a show named after him.
I believe you.
Okay.
Did he host it?
Yeah,
What if Drew Carey hosted it?
That'd be funny.
that would have also been
Points don't matter.
acceptable.
You heard from some of our community members in this episode, and we want you to be a part of that. It's very easy. We have a Discord server where we are hanging out, and we also talk to you, the viewer, the listener. You can be a part of that by going to discord.gg/newgameplus.
We're not in Discord bodily. That is just
We're here bodily.
digitally.
Well, we've posted videos bodily
Of our
in
bodies?
Discord, yeah. I've
Oh.
touched Kenny's body in a video. I
Mhm.
have, technically.
It's probably true. Thank you to those of you who make Elements a reality. We love all the content we get to bring you, but Elements especially is an overt bonus provided by our patrons who support us on patreon.com. There's a whole bunch of them, but our producer level supporters, we want to especially say thank you to, including all of the following people: Amarlian, Antonin, Astral Soul, Ben, Brunt, Carrie, Captain Protein, Dan, Francesca, Gimbin, Joey, Jordan, J. Robert, Justin, Knickknack, Corey, Maxima, Mr. Lattes, Nawel, Sajan, Secret Duck of Evermore, Shauna, Thomas, Unbedavable, William, and Zion. You guys are great, unlike my co-hosts. Also great are our director level supporters,
Ooh.
Bro Jim, Carlisle, and Clyn. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks,
we love you.
Was that the Jay-Z diamond?
No, it was the heart.
Hova?
I threw him a,
West Side?
I threw him a heart.
You can catch our episode next week as we continue playing one old game for 7 days and talk about it. May have gotten that out of order.
Something like that.
Until then, I'm still Cuphead.
I'm not next.
I'm also Cuphead.
I'm bodily Nolan?
You didn't want to be Cuphead?
Never.
And this has been New Game Plus.